Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 20th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services. Cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
This is James Brown, the Godfather Soul. I feel good. You're checking out my man, Mike Siegel. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy.
Folks, welcome back in. Good to have you with us on a Friday. That's right. Weekend is coming up, and we are delighted to be here. I mean, what more could you want? The Red Sox are playing like on another planet, and this town is vibrant and alive. In any case, unfortunately, what we're going to talk about here does not reflect that situation, because we know about the tragic loss of a police officer, Sean Gannon, the canine officer from Yarmouth. As we know, he was shot and killed last week on Thursday by Thomas Latanowicz. At least that's the alleged killer. And he and other officers were actually serving an arrest warrant at home in Barnstable. And this young officer had 8 years' experience. He was the father of an 8-year-old. And now that youngster is going to be without a father. Tragic situation, but then the question becomes, what do we do about this? You know, Massachusetts is known as being soft on crime. And this fellow who's alleged to have killed Officer Gannon is one who has frustrated prosecutors because he got basically soft sentences and even charges dropped in cases where he has done things that should have warranted greater punishment. But somehow in this Commonwealth, criminals seem to get a better break than elsewhere. Well, we're trying to change that thanks to one of the state representatives, Shauna O'Connell from Bristol, 3rd District, and we're glad to have her with us. Representative O'Connell, how are you? Nice to talk to you.
Oh, I'm good. Good. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. And this state hasn't got the death penalty, as we know. I think there are 38 that do. And now, because of this tragic murder of Officer Gannon, you've come out and said basically you want to have the death penalty reinstated for the killing of a police officer. And we had 2 lost yesterday in Florida, by the way. So, you know, officers seem to be sitting ducks here in some of these cases. What's your sense on this bill?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, across the country, we're seeing an assault on police officers. They're being murdered, ambushed, assassinated, whatever term you want to use. And, you know, I think a lot of people agree that we have to protect the people that put their lives on the line every day to protect us. And I know that there's a lot of people interested in this, and I have to say at the outset that I know that legislators on the Cape are, you know, personally affected by this. That, you know, they knew the officer personally. Rep. Tim Whalen is a former state police officer. He's going to be having a lot of input into this and be a leader in this issue as well. So we want to work with everyone that we can work with to do this. But, you know, even the governor has come out in favor of the death penalty for cop killers. So we're talking about, you know, a small population of people, of criminals that, you know, commit this crime, that I think we need to send the message, if you're going to take the life of a police officer, you're going to face that same fate.
Does this state have the appetite in its legislature to confront this issue and reinstate the death penalty in these cases, given the fact of its perception of being soft on crime?
I don't know about the legislature itself. I do know that since we've been having this conversation, I've gotten a lot of, you know, emails and phone calls from people, a lot of people in law enforcement that are glad we're talking about this. They want to see it happen. You know, another piece of it is, if you put someone, you know, life without parole in prison, then we're talking DOC law enforcement officers there. Yeah, that puts them in great danger, because someone who's killed a police officer, they go to prison, they're a hero in prison. They have nothing to lose, nothing to stop them from committing more crimes while they're in prison, from, you know, attempting to take the life of a correctional officer there. So that puts them in a lot of danger as well. So there's another piece to consider in giving the capital punishment to cop killers.
The other thing is, Representative O'Connell, that does occur is that I think a number of years ago, I remember reading some data that life sentences wind up being about 15 years anyway. So you've got parole boards, clemency, and those sorts of things, governor's pardons, and all of that. Because once the initial horrifying act is forgotten, 10, 15 years down the road, all of a sudden people's sympathies weigh in, and then these people do get out even if they had a life sentence in the first place.
Yeah, good point. Life sentence doesn't always mean life sentence. And, we have seen it happen in the past. So if someone's in there, 15, 20, 25 years, whatever it is, and they say, look, I've learned my lesson, I'm sorry, and they could potentially be released. So we don't want to see that happen either. I think the death penalty for cop killers is something that we need to seriously consider here in Massachusetts. And when you have a death penalty sentence, it's an option. It's another tool. It's something that you can use. It doesn't mean you have to use it in every single case, but there are some cases that warrant it, like clearly this one where there's absolutely no question what happened in this case.
And the other
clear-cut evidence.
It's a frustrating case because this Latanowicz, the alleged killer, has had his run-ins with the law over the years. He served 4 to 5 years on gun charges, and even the prosecutor expressed frustration because he never really got tough sentences, the long sentences that he should have gotten. Had he gotten a long sentence here, he wouldn't have been out to do what he did to Officer Gannon last week. So there seems to be something of an underlying culture about not being harsh with criminals in this state, or am I overstating that?
No, not at all. I don't think you can overstate that, and that's been a big part of this conversation too. Is judges and the officers. Law enforcement is calling this guy 125 because they don't even want to give him the consideration of saying his name. And if you look at his record, he had about 125 crimes on his record. He just most recently was in jail, and I think it was a fairly short period of time, maybe 4 years or less. Once he got out, he violated his parole 3 times and was not put back in jail. He should have been in jail. He shouldn't have even been out in the public to be able to commit this crime. And so, we see all over Massachusetts judges coddling criminals at the expense of victims, at the expense of safety in our communities. And, we're now talking about, look, how can we get more oversight on these or for these judges that are appointed for life and that are not keeping criminals in jail and handing out easy sentences or no sentences at all and letting them go after violation after violation. And a lot of them are handgun violations. There's supposed to be a mandatory sentence, mandatory penalty for handgun violations, and we're not seeing that happen in many, many cases.
He's had gun charges, this fellow.
Yeah.
Got a 4 to 5 year sentence. But, there are other things. 3 strikes, you're out. You can enumerate certain felonies. The legislature could pass a law. I was involved in that in another state as a host, where we actually did a campaign by initiative to get 3 strikes, you're out in Washington State, and it led to Bill Clinton, when he was president, talking about 3 strikes, you're out at the federal level. And they did do that, in fact, when Clinton was president, because that's another way to deter people. They don't want to spend life in prison for the crimes, and this fellow apparently had committed other crimes that maybe would have fit in that category, and he would not be out on the street, which is another part of the problem. There's an unwillingness here to confront, over the years I've been here, to confront criminals. Just some people are bad and commit bad acts, and if you judge them by the behavior, you don't have to judge them by their character, just by the behavior. You come to the conclusion that this person needs to be someplace other than in society. I mean, what about protecting the innocent people?
That's right, and clearly, they're not being protected. Supposedly, we have 3 strikes and you're out here in Massachusetts, a violent criminal offender bill that was passed a few years back. That took, Mike, I think about 12 years to get passed in Massachusetts. just to get it done. So, the question has been, why didn't this guy, in 125 fall under that 3 strikes and you're out bill, and why wasn't he in jail for life without parole at the very least? So I think we need to look at the law that we have in place now. Is it harsh enough? Is it strict enough? Is it being followed by judges? And that goes back to, again, finding out, I think, getting more data on judges and how they sentence and who they let go and how their bench trials, how many bench trials they have, how they come out, because we don't know a lot, and it's difficult to get information on the records, the sentencing records of judges. And I think that would help us to really see who's doing what here.
No question about that. And, I'd be willing to bet, Representative O'Connell, that in many of these cases, because prosecutors are overwhelmed with cases, they'll plea bargain down. So the defense attorney gets a plea bargain for what would be a crime under the 3 strikes law, but they bargain down to a crime that's below the radar, below the 3 strikes level. And so it never kicks in that they did this more serious crime, but they got convicted of a lesser crime.
It does. And so, that's another problem to face, prosecutors pleading down, and they are overwhelmed with cases, oftentimes. But, sometimes you'll hear people say, look, we have to make sure that prosecutors aren't too worried about their prosecution record, and are more worried about, putting these guys behind bars and handing out the toughest sentences possible. So you don't want to see people just pleading down because they're afraid that they might not, if it was a higher crime, get the conviction.
Do we know what the circumstances were? I know they were serving an arrest warrant when Officer Gannon was there at the residence in Yarmouth. Do we know what the circumstances were about this?
For the arrest warrant?
Yeah, in other words, when they knocked on the door, did somebody just start shooting, or what? Do we have any information on that?
No, and I would need to read it again because we've all read it, but there's been so much more information out there. My understanding is that this guy was up in his attic or something, or closet or somewhere, and then when Officer Gannon went to get him, he shot the officer. So they're calling it an ambush, is the term that I've heard used.
Well, and that's what it sounds like it was.
Yeah, and actually if you saw the news, you saw a lot of investigators on the roof of this home kind of tearing it up, looking for, whatever kind of evidence they were looking for.
So there's still, the jury's out still on the final determination of how this took place. And we'll get that, I'm sure, as the information is put together. I want to go back, and we'll take a break and come back and take a few calls for you till the bottom of the hour. I want to go back to the point about the legislature, because it's the legislature that's going to have to do this. There's no other way to do it, and you could put mandatories in there once the conviction occurs for killing an officer, that a judge would have no discretion if the person is found guilty. But the legislature here is prone to avoid this kind of sentence. Have you talked to your Democrat colleagues at all? What's your sense?
I haven't been able to talk to a lot of people yet. A lot of people are, it's school vacation. They're not around right now. I know there's one Democrat, Jim Maselli, who actually has his own bill filed on the death penalty. So there are people who support it, who want to talk about it. But the unfortunate thing is the legislature just passed a criminal justice reform bill to give judges even more discretion to keep people out of jail, to give them more good time while they're in jail so they get out more quickly. And, I can see that in some cases that may be an okay thing to do, but I think it went too far backwards, gave too much leniency, and is just considering too much criminals rather than victims, and what happens to victims after these crimes are committed, what happens to our streets when we have criminals roaming the streets. So it is going to be a tough sell in the legislature, especially considering that they just gave even more discretion to judges.
There you go. We'll come right back, and I appreciate you staying with us for a few more minutes, take some calls. I know the public is going to be very interested in this as well. I'm sure you know that from the response you've already gotten from people out there in your district as well as around the state. Number to Boston is 617-266-6868. Good to have Representative Shauna O'Connell with us from the 3rd District. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. We get back to your calls for the representatives after this at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Let's get back to it. Mike Siegel for Jeff today. Good to have you here as we get back with Representative Shauna O'Connell, 3rd District. And she's proposing that we have a death penalty reinstated in the Commonwealth. There is not one at the present time, as you know. And as a result of that horrible murder of Officer Gannon last week, which was, to say the least, horrifying and still going through the numbness of mourning are many people in this state. Let's go to your calls, starting with Bob in Newton. Bob, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hi. First of all, I'd just like to say that I admire your guest a lot. But I don't agree with any law that would single out policemen as far as, like, the death penalty against killing a policeman, because I don't feel that their lives are any more important than anyone else's. Mine, yours, anyone. And I would never, ever support anything like that.
Well, Representative O'Connell, why don't you start? Go right ahead. Thank you, Bob, for calling.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate your comments. And, I have heard people say that. The thing I think that we just have to keep in mind is we live in Massachusetts. Right now we're dealing with an officer that was just recently killed. We had Officer Tarantino killed a few years ago. Sean Collier killed a few years before that. And there just seems to be more of an appetite or more support for something that's a little more refined and confined to a smaller population of people, where they're cop killers and there's, evidence and it's a clear-cut case that they have killed an officer. So I do understand what you're saying, but I just think that we need to think about where we live and what we can actually get done here.
I think you're absolutely right. To get a general death penalty bill would be far more onerous and difficult, insurmountable in this legislature, and even getting the bill for the police would be tough. But the other point I would make is that these officers deal with facing death every single day in their jobs. I'm sitting behind a microphone. I'm not facing death here. You're working in the legislature. Presumably, unless you get a lunatic breaking into the State House, you're not facing death in that respect either. These guys and women live facing death. Their spouses send them off to work for an 8-hour shift, having no idea whether they're coming home.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, they go out every day. They don't know if it's going to be the last time they walk out their door and kiss their family. And, even some of the tasks that you might not think were so dangerous, serving a warrant for someone, and an officer gets killed in that, stopping someone for a traffic violation, and they pull out a firearm on you and shoot an officer. So they do face a much, much greater danger than the rest of us every single day.
Let's go to Walter in Wilmington. Walter, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Mike, thanks for taking my call. You are always a breath of fresh air on WRKO.
Thank you, sir.
I am 67 years old, and I cannot remember a time in my life when there was less respect for law enforcement personnel. And I think that it is way past due for a federal death penalty for the killing of a law enforcement officer. And I want it to be swift, and this whole life in prison without possibility of parole, I don't go for that at all. I don't want my tax dollars to pay for some killer of officer to languish in prison, refuse work like most prisons. They don't want to work, fine, they just stay in their cell all day, or they go down to the gym and work out or watch Comcast cable. It's ridiculous. It's assassinations is what is going on.
It's well said. I thank you for calling. I'll just mention very quickly, capital punishment does exist at the federal level. Murder large-scale drug trafficking, espionage, treason, attempting to kill a witness or a juror or a court officer. So there are several categories where there's a federal death penalty. We're going to wrap it up
with... Yeah, so it does exist, but, it has to be a federal crime, of course. So
right.
A local state police officer, or police officer wouldn't qualify.
Wouldn't fit that. And the Congress would never pass a law that a state or local police officer, state trooper or local police officer being killed would qualify under the federal law, because it would be the state that has the authority over that. And that's...
it does have to be done at the state level.
But anyway, look, I wish you good luck. Everybody does here. We're going to continue talking about this. It's a horrifying situation, and we wish you good luck in trying to get this legislature to move on this. And I think a grassroots demand for it from the voters would no doubt go a long way toward helping you get your job done on that.
Oh, I think so, too. I think the power of the people is so important, and it really makes a difference. And we're looking at, at least kind of three different things here. The death penalty for cop killers, more oversight for judges, and looking at the present laws and why people are able to evade them after violent felonies and not be in prison where they should be.
Representative O'Connell, good luck. Thank you, and congratulations on taking on this challenge.
Oh, thanks very much, Mike, for having me.
Take care. Have a good weekend, too. We're in for Jeff Kuhner, Mike Siegel with the Voice of Boston, WRKO. News is next. Here we are back at it. Good to have you with us. Our lines are jammed, not surprisingly, because of this terrible situation. Officer Sean Gannon, a K-9 officer who in Barnstable tried to effect an arrest warrant, got killed in the process. We'll get the details as that investigation unfolds. We know who the perpetrator was, allegedly at least, and it's pretty clear that that's the case. And now the question is, will this legislature stand up and be counted in the Commonwealth and pass a bill that would make it a death penalty crime to murder in the first degree with intent, opportunity, and premeditation a police officer? Obviously, this, and premeditation, by the way, can be 5 seconds. This individual, whoever did it, and we really know who it was, but he has a right to a trial. But this individual intended, with premeditation, to kill that officer. There isn't any question about that. Let's go to your calls and what you think about all of this as we go to Anastasia in Lowell. Anastasia, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Yes, hi. Governor Baker may say he is for the death penalty, but why did he just sign a crime bill that coddles these people is my question. And it shouldn't even have gotten to this point. Rather than having a discussion about the death penalty, why did, this crime bill went through, and half the people I know never even knew it was going through. It has so many problems with it. It coddles criminals, and you're talking, well, the legislators should get together now and put in the death penalty for cop killers. But listen, they just passed a bill that coddles criminals, and this is what we should be discussing.
I agree with you, and this state has an underlying culture of somehow not wanting to do tough sentences in the way other states might. Compare it to Texas, for example, and other states that take the bull by the horns in these cases. I think, quite frankly, this is, as we know, Boston's a very Catholic area, and there is an opposition in the church to the death penalty. There's more prone to be a sympathy for criminals who may have had a bad upbringing and all of those other issues that come up, trying to excuse people. And I think the church has a tremendous influence in the Commonwealth. You may want to comment about that part of this as well. And as a result, you wind up not getting tough laws that you need. Arthur in Chestnut Hill, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Well, first, thanks, Mike, and happy Friday, and a sad Friday when it's the last day you'll be on. To begin with, I have a message for Shauna. I wish she would run for governor. I was hoping I could say that to her because, believe me, I can tell you that she would get a lot of support from a lot of people, and I would be the first one to donate and go to work for a candidate for the first time because she's worked tirelessly for the people and as always has a good common sense message. But that said, about 2 or 3 days before they came down to his place to pick him up, they were after him in Everett in a big car chase where wound up him abandoning his car in a cemetery in Everett, and he got away. When they went to his house, I think they had a state trooper and a few other cops. But looking at this guy's record and what he had done a few days before, if ever a guy needed to be picked up with a SWAT team, this cried out for it. They really made a mistake in the way they went after this guy, and this poor wonderful police officer went in a case that it was awful that he went into the harm's way the way that he did. They should have had a SWAT team at this guy's house.
Well, that of course, after the fact, you're right. Looking back at it, Monday morning quarterbacking, there's no question about that. And unfortunately,
because of what he did the few days before when he.
Well, not only that,
with his long arrest record, and this guy wasn't going to give up easily.
No, you're right. I was just about to bring that up. The arrest record was enormous, but there were cases where he should have been convicted and wasn't. They let him off the hook. There's an unintended protection racket for criminals in this state for some reason. It's not tough, and it needs to be. So I appreciate it, though, Arthur. Thank you for the kind words, and have a great weekend, too. Scott in Weymouth, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Michael, what's up? Good afternoon, sir.
Hi there.
Nice to speak with you again. You're doing a great job filling in for Kuhner. I'm sure he's proud.
Thank you. Well, Jeff's a good guy.
All right. So real quick comment on the police. Now, let me preface my call by saying nobody respects the police more than me. I really do, right? If something goes wrong in your life, who do you call? The police. However, to not admit the fact that 1% of them are awful people, just like every other industry. If you go to McDonald's today and get a cheeseburger, 1% of their employees are awful people too. So I respect them, I love them, but don't think there's not bad police out there. There really are, okay? And I love body cams. I think it's a great idea. Why? Because we're on the air, right? Are you still on?
I'm here, sir.
Okay. I love body cameras on the police. I'm very pro body cameras, and I'll tell you why. Because the 99% of police officers that are great people that are serving their communities don't care if they're being filmed because they're doing the right thing. They're upholding the oath they took. They took an oath of office to be a police officer. But it's going to expose the 1% that are awful. Do you agree or disagree with body cameras, Michael?
I agree with body cameras, and I think you're right and maybe it's higher than 99% that do a good job. But whatever that number is, the fact is, in this case, and as I mentioned earlier, the fellow who called and made the point that everybody's life is equally important, and I agree with that. But you're not going to get that bill passed in this Commonwealth. You might get a bill passed protecting police officers whose job it is to face death every single day on the job. Look,
but they signed up, Michael. But don't forget. And again, I'll reiterate.
They signed up for it.
For the police.
Wait a minute now. They signed up
for it, Michael.
They signed up. Wait a minute now. They signed up for it, but that doesn't mean we can't protect them the best we can on the job. If somebody knows they're going to get the death penalty if they shoot a police officer, maybe it will deter them from doing it in the first place and save the life.
Michael, I agree. We agree, perhaps more than you realize. I agree with you. I'm just saying, don't think there's not bad police. There are. They're out there.
But that begs the question. This guy was just doing his job.
Got Gannon? What's his name, sir? Officer
Sean Gannon.
Gannon. Very sad. Oh, awful. Terrible.
All right.
Yeah, it should be the death penalty. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you. Dave in Salem, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi. A few years back, we had this on being voted on. It was a child in Somerville that was killed, and we had one politician that held it up altogether, and he was from Peabody. And I'm a Catholic, and I'm for the death penalty. And the attorneys make a lot of money on this revolving door thing. So that's why this doesn't get passed, because they make too much money representing these folks. Now, my neighbor was a defense attorney, and his father got hit by a drunken driver and killed his father. That's when he hung up his law degree and became a landscaper. It only happens when it happens to them that they realize this is a bad deal, having a revolving door and not a death penalty.
Well, it's going to have to change, and it's only going to change. Thank you for calling. I appreciate it. It's going to have to change. And the way it's going to change is by the public demanding it. Everybody listening to the Kuhner report, and I'm sure Jeff, who talked about it previously, is going to talk about it again, is you calling, writing, imploring, protesting to get the legislature to do what it should have done in the first place. Certainly to reinstate the death penalty for police officers' protection. Again, they do the job every single day to protect you and me. There's no downside to having a death penalty for killing a police officer. It's a protection for them, and it's a protection for us, so that more officers will feel better about going out and doing their job because they've been protected to the degree that they can be by the society, by the state, by the legislature, and by the governor. Tom in New Jersey, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Great topic, and God bless you. You know, before we get to my main point, I just want to say one word about Barbara Bush. I mean, the media's been falling all over her. I know it's not on topic, Mike, but she did a lot of harm to the pro-life movement. She was not a pro-life, and I found her to be a curmudgeon. So I just wanted to get that in there, a different voice on Barbara Bush. But I called about...
Well, I just say one thing about that. Barbara Bush was as honest as the day is long, and I think in that case, you can respectfully disagree with her. I think that's fine, but she was very honest about her views on that. She opposed her own husband on it, as a matter of fact. But go ahead.
Yeah, she was a New World Order establishment Republican that was not pro-life. But anyway, Mike, what we have is judicial tyranny. I mean, you look what they did to Dinesh D'Souza for contributing a little bit too much to a political candidate. They ran him out on the rails. 6 months of hard community service after like 6 months in jail. How does a demon criminal like Latanowicz walk the streets? These judges have to be called out, Mike. They're immune. They can do this. Social engineering has taken on a really ugly path where they hammer anything conservative and anything on the left. They're just really soft on. I hope the Thomas More Law Center, which is a wonderful organization, calls out these left-wing, tyrannical judges that are really sitting up there, men in black. Mark Levin talks about it. They're sitting up there like tin pot dictators, and they're not held to any standard. They don't answer to anyone. This is not America, Mike.
No, it isn't. But the problem is the judges in this Commonwealth actually goes back, believe it or not, to 1780. That judges in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are appointed for life by the governor, and the governor's council has to approve it, but that's a rubber stamp, basically. And so it's the public has no say. If you had elected judges and you could see their record out there publicly, be a different story. I appreciate the call, and I thank you. Carol in Bridgewater, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hi. I definitely agree with Shauna on everything that she's trying to do. I really feel that maybe we should legislate a bill that changes it to judges being elected. But in this state, with all the Democrats that we have that primarily hold the state house, there's no way they're ever turn to do this because they're their voters. They're going to get them back on the street and want them to be able to vote Democrat. Look what we do for you.
You know, look at the power that the governor has in this state when it comes to judges. It's enormous because, number one, if it's a lifetime appointment, that means there are not many seats that open up in the courts in the Commonwealth, whether it's the Supreme Court, the Appeals Court, the District Court, the Family Court, whatever it may be. All of these judges get lifetime appointments.
We should change it, the term limits.
So then even the judges, the power the governors, the power they have is over the openings that come up. And obviously with lifetime appointments, those are few and far between. So then the public has no input whatsoever. That's the unfortunate part of this system. Carol, thank you very much. Nice to talk to you, and I appreciate it. Number to Boston is 617-266-6868. We'll continue taking your calls on this. And again, I would say just everybody out there relentlessly contact your own state rep, your own state senator, and let them know that you want a death penalty when a police officer is killed by a criminal. And when they're found guilty, that the death penalty ought to apply. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. Good to have you with us at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. It's 1250. We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. 1254 it is at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Talking about the death penalty for people who kill police officers being reinstated in the Commonwealth. And we're glad to have Shauna O'Connell, state representative here from the 3rd District, who is leading the charge on this, and appreciate her time today. Don in Stoughton, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Yes, Michael. We should be able to recall judges, the voters. We should have the death penalty. And all court proceedings should be published weekly on the Internet and or videotape so that we can watch it. But as you and I are speaking, there's an armed hostage home intrusion going on in Stoughton here, Michael.
Do you know anything about what's happening there?
Just briefly on the news, they stated down off of Pearl Street, as you're headed towards Canton, Mass., there was an armed home intrusion, and the Stoughton Police and the Massachusetts State Police are currently there, and I guess they're trying to negotiate the armed intruder out. But, Michael, I'm just wondering what we're going to find out about this armed intruder once this is all over.
Well, probably, I'll be facetious here, probably an arm's length list of crimes or charges that he's just walked away from. One of the problems with this Commonwealth, and it's very much like California where they protect illegal aliens from crimes, is that, if you commit a crime here, there's an underlying current in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is that this person was misguided because of being raised in a broken home, or because of being raised by an abusive parent, or being neglected and left out on his own or her own to live with at the age of 15, and they left home because of the abuse in the home or neglect in the home, whatever it may be, finding excuses for the behavior. Now, we can understand, exactly right. So you got to look at it that way and say, all right, so we can feel badly that the person had a bad break in the way they were raised. But you know what? There are a lot of people that get raised badly and wind up goodly, so to speak.
No, you're right, Michael, but you don't share what happened to you with somebody else. And last point, Michael, the perpetrator who killed Officer Sergeant Gannon, had he been lawfully prosecuted back in 2010 when he had federally violated the law regarding firearms, he would still be in jail, and Officer Gannon would be alive today.
Well, that's what the prosecutor said, the frustration of it. I appreciate it, Don, and thank you. And hope that situation works out for the people living there. That's a horrible thing to go through, a break-in. Bruce in Essex, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Yeah, well, I have a question. Why would judges appointed by Democrats in the state be better than those appointed by the governor? We live in Massachusetts, where the last time that our vote for president counted was back when Reagan ran for a second term. We are 1/3 Republican and 2/3 Democrat. So I'd like to hear, why would it be better to have judges who are appointed by Democrats?
You mean, in other words,
that's who would be appointed in any
I
election.
Understand. Right. So in other words, it's a good point. In other words, but at least it would be the people voting. It would be the will of the people voting for the judges, as opposed to the governor just making an appointment. It's obviously
it was a will of 1/3 of the voters in Massachusetts that it be the the Republican elected president, but he wasn't, was he?
Well, that's true. I appreciate the call, and I thank you. And you're right; it might work out that way, but it's still better to have the people have a say in this thing. Bill and Lynn, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Very quickly, go ahead.
Yes, I've been for the death penalty years ago, but I see it running in other states where it becomes a tremendous cost factor, and it goes on for years and years. Someone just recently down in, I think it was Missouri, 20-some-odd years, they've been waiting to put them to death. The only ones making out on this are these attorneys, which are astronomical payrolls, and it's unbelievable that way. Unless they can do it and order it in a short length of period of time, everybody gets dragged back in again, all the witnesses, and over the years, they're just trying to forget about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, the bottom line is going to be that you use whatever deterrent you can use. And if you can say to somebody, you know what, pal, if you kill a police officer, you're likely to get the death penalty if you're convicted of that crime. That's what's going to be a possible deterrent. Most people don't want to die when they commit the crime, and they think, particularly in this state, that they're going to be okay because of the soft-on-crime mentality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. We come back with Dr. Jerome Corsi. Is Bob Mueller's investigation finally coming to an end? Stay with us.
The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 100.7 WZLX HD2 Boston, an iHeart radio station.